Hello, and welcome to the Bridge to Change podcast. My name is Catherine Paulson, CMO of Bridgemark Strategies. And now I'd like to introduce you to our host, Jeff Nash, and his guest, Matt Sonnen.
Thanks, Catherine. And thanks, Matt, for joining. For all of our listeners out there, so Matt is the founder of PFI Advisors. And PFI is a firm that focuses on helping advisors establish their own RIAs. But I'd love for Matt maybe to, as I introduce Matt to everybody, to kind of give a little bit of background of how he got started and what he has done in his career to building up to this point. Matt, thanks for joining the podcast here. And would you mind just providing a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. This month marks my 25th year in the wealth management space. As many people in our industry, I started in the wirehouse world. I started at Merrill Lynch right out of college. A hotshot team of 4 advisors had gone from Goldman to Merrill prior to me joining, and those 4 advisors were doing more business than collectively the entire Beverly Hills branch of Merrill Lynch. And so Merrill was doing anything they could to keep them happy. And so they hired me with 0 experience. They threw me to the wolves. They said, hey, you're their operations point person. They're frustrated because now that they've left Goldman, they've joined Merrill. They don't know who to call for an options trade, or how do they place a mutual fund trade? How do they do a block trade, et cetera. So that was my introduction into the industry. I stayed with that team for 8 years, kind of worked my way up the totem pole within their team. And then in 2005, I briefly lost my mind and I went to become an insurance salesman, left the team and went to become an insurance salesman, but was smart enough to stay in touch with them. And so 2 years later, they contacted me and said, hey, we want to start an RIA, but we have no desire to learn how to start an RIA. So can you go figure it out for us? We don't know how custody works. We don't know how compliance works. If you go build it, we'll come join you whenever you're ready. So in 2008, we launched Luminous Capital. They resigned from Merrill and came in and brought $1.7 billion of client assets. I was the COO and CCO for the 4.5-year run from $1.7 billion up to $6 billion of assets. And then we sold that to First Republic Bank in late 2012. I wanted to stay in the RIA space. I like it a lot. So I left there and went to Focus Financial, the big aggregator, lived in New York for a couple of years. Help them with their existing firms, as well as moving teams out of the wirehouse world and starting RIAs under the Focus umbrella. And then in 2015, my entrepreneurial wife, Reese, she was whispering in my ear, hey, we should start our own consulting gig. So her and I started PFI Advisors in 2015, and we've been going ever since.
That's a great story. So how many billion-dollar plus teams have you, starting with Luminous, right? And Luminous is a great story, how they went from Merrill to First Republic to then, or to RIA to First Republic, and then actually out of First Republic back to their own RIA space.
Yep.
So really well-known story in the industry. But how many firms have you broken away over the years, including the Focus days?
Yeah, probably a couple under Focus, and then PFI. We typically do one big breakaway a year. We can talk about some of the other engagements we do, but so we're 6 years in. I would guess we've probably done 8 under PFI, and I probably did a couple at Focus. So I'm probably 10 to 12 RIAs. Probably I've kind of had my hands in the launch of those firms.
That's a great learning, I'm sure, from that. And, I'd be surprised if there's anyone who's got more experience in the industry in multi-billion-dollar breakaways, than you do, as you've kind of helped these folks from establishing the RIAs to actually breaking away into space. I know you get referrals from the custodians because of that expertise that you have.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't consider myself a great salesperson, so we've really relied on content marketing. We do a lot of white papers, articles. I write a column at wealthmanagement.com. So just kind of relying on that content floating around and having that luminous story behind me is always helpful. So yeah, most of our growth has just come through referrals, like you said.
Yeah, and congrats on that.
Thank you.
And one of the things we were talking about, right, as you look to move, you know, I think that there's so much industry buzz around becoming an RIA and the flexibility and all of those things in that space. And yet one of the things you and I were talking about is it's probably not, even though this is how you make a living, literally helping people start their RIAs, it's probably not right for a lot of folks. Maybe that's something you can expand on is where do you see the RIA market? How do you see it growing? Is it right for certain people and not right for others? Kind of what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I always get nervous that the opinion of PFI and the opinion of Matt Sonnen is, oh, he's got his nose in the air. He will only work with multi-billion-dollar teams. Our model, what we do is we help advisors leave the wirehouse or IBD channel and start an RIA from scratch, something that they want to own completely. We're not a platform. We're not an investor in these businesses. We're just a consulting firm. So, like I said, I've always known we'll do about one of these a year because when we started in 2015, I told people if you're under $1 billion, I think you should go tuck in somewhere. You won't have to figure out the 401k plan for your employees. You won't have to figure out E&O insurance and cybersecurity and what your tech stack is. Just go plug in somewhere that's already built it. The beauty of our industry, it's grown so tremendously. Now today, 2022, it's, hey, if you're under 2 billion, there's plenty of $2 billion tuck-ins going on right now. So I think a lot of advisors that don't have that entrepreneurial itch, there's no reason for them to go start it from scratch. They can still, quote, move to independence, right? They can still leave those employee channels and come into the RIA channel, but they don't have to figure it all out. It's already been built. There's plenty of platforms and other RIAs they can join. There's a lot of solutions out there, and I never push anybody one way or the other. I think there's pros and cons of all of them. Our little niche is we help you start a firm from scratch, but I've known since before we launched the firm, we're probably only going to do one of those a year.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention, I mean, that's how you and I got to know each other, right? Is we were at a Fidelity event and as the custodian, and you and I are working, in tandem on things where obviously what we do at Bridgemark and helping advisors evaluate the tuck-in firms or even evaluate the custodians, it's then we then can work with you after they've selected those partners to help them with those all of the different elements of the transition. There's a lot of work that goes with that. And that's really how we first met and became friends.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important piece to that story.
We were talking about referrals, right? When somebody calls me up, usually the story is something along the lines of, "Hey, nice to meet you, Matt. We've been working at this for 18 months. We've went and talked to everybody. Right. At our size, we happen to be a $4 billion team, a $6 billion team, whatever it may be. At our size, it probably makes more sense for us to just start it from scratch. The tuck-ins may not work, but there are plenty of solutions for teams of all sizes outside of just starting it from scratch.
Yeah, it's funny how the $1 billion has become $2 billion. I still think for me, I tend to say $1 billion because I actually think I almost get discredited when I say a $2 billion number for firms. They're like, you got to be kidding me, $2 billion is too much.
Yeah.
And they think I then become biased. But I agree, the costs and the risks have just continued to increase, and that's forced the assets for these firms to starting their own RIAs looking at it.
Yep.
When you see RIAs, right, when you talk to advisors who are, reaching out to you 300 million, 500 million, what are some of the things that you end up talking to them about?
So it really is that entrepreneurial itch, right? We have had, I don't want to say we've never worked with anyone under 2 billion. We've had some great breakaway clients that have been in the 200-300 million dollar range. That they have to really have that itch and say, no, I want to be a business owner. So we'll help them think through the tech stack, right? How do I recreate what I've had? I've showed up every day at Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, Ameriprise, whatever it is, and all of these tools are here. So PFI, what do I need to recreate it? So obviously that starts with the custodian, and we'll go through performance reporting tools and CRM, et cetera, et cetera. But then also just that business infrastructure as well, and helping them think through, especially now office space is so nebulous. So do you want a physical office? If you do, let's figure out, what size TV you need in the conference room. What's the entryway going to look like? So we'll help them think through, the layout and furniture, and then all the IT, obviously computers, phones. Like I mentioned earlier, cybersecurity is very important these days, especially if you're going to have people working from home or working remotely. You got to figure all of that out. So just all aspects of starting a business.
Do you find that the income, it's not about income, right? So you could be an independent financial advisor as a tuck-in under an independent broker-dealer, or even someone else's RIA, or you could establish your own. Do you find the economics are better, worse, or it's not about the economics? It's really about the individual's motivations and spirit.
In my opinion, it really is their motivations. I mean, within you're and this side of the business better than I do, but a payout here versus a payout there. What's my profit margin if I have my own RIA? It really it's all, and these are well paid individuals, so we're splitting hairs from one model to the other. So it really, in my opinion, it comes down to, I really do want to be a business owner. I want to give this a try, and then clearly the monetization of ability, if you own the firm yourself, is clearly a driver as well.
Yes, no question. No question. And I find and that's why we go back to the 1 billion or even 2 billion number, right? Is so the scale you get from the cost side. So it is advantaged from any of those things with, technology and compliance and insurance and staff. That's from how I see that side of it as well.
Yeah, the economies of scale and having infrastructure and having the revenue to support that infrastructure is clearly needed. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to come back and say, so you talk about being a business owner, right? And I've always looked at that, and I want to see if we can qualify this a little bit, because I've always looked at that as really the RIA ownership piece to it, right? Because you could still be an independent business owner if you were at a major broker dealer like an LPL or a Commonwealth or someone like that. I look at it as the RIA gives you that ultimate flexibility, performance reporting of your portfolios, and for people who are wanting to, managing money is a much more important thing. Do you have a perspective on the money management side within the RIA space versus people who are just planners? Is there something that, if you're more money manager, that might be something that you'd be looking more to the RIA? If you're more planners and tuck-ins, for that, let's say it's in the gray area on size-wise.
There clearly has been a evolution of our industry going more towards financial planning. I mentioned 25 years in the industry. So 1997, when I joined Merrill Lynch, the typical advisor pitch back then was, "Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Client, you should hire me because I can make you wealthy. I have a 25 stock portfolio that I manage myself. It's done really well in up markets, down markets, and you should hire me because I'm going to make you money." And to jump forward to today, that same advisor is really telling a different story. It's not about how much money you can make for the client or what the performance of this model that they're running is about. It's more about, we're going to help you live a more fulfilling life. We're going to help you figure out what you want to do with your money, and we'll build a portfolio around those goals. It's very goals based driven. So I think that evolution is happening both in the wirehouses, both for tuck-in advisors joining firms, and for RIA owners that are owning the firm themselves. I think our industry as a whole is really moving more towards that planning centric messaging.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. I want to continue to kind of come back to something you said earlier, right? Which is technology, when you start your own RIA, and when you're looking to establish and create your own RIA, Can you kind of get into a little bit of some of the things, just even high level, some of the decision points? You talked about literally TV screens and things that PFI helps folks with, which I think is so kind of on point. I think about cybersecurity as an example. And there's so many risks that I feel like advisors don't even entirely understand when they're taking on their own independent RIA, and so many different decisions around technologies. And I feel like this is an area where some advisors embrace that, and some advisors really, are distraught with some of those decisions. But maybe just at a high level, you can share what you have seen with some of the either stories that you've worked with advisors that may be distraught by that, where you've been able to help out, or just some of the different decision points that they have to face when they're making and establishing their own RIA.
Yeah, again, the beauty of the growth our industry has had is there's so many service providers now providing services to these RIA owners. I made the mistake early on back in my Luminous days. I thought, well, technology is technology as far as the IT infrastructure of our firm. It doesn't matter what IT vendor we go with. And so I thought, well, a local IT firm sounds better than someone that's in New York. Etc. So I went with a local firm, but they specialized. I found out after the fact they specialized in law offices and didn't know the wealth management space, and so they didn't get in the office till 9 a.m. We were in the office at 5, and so when I showed up at 5 a.m., if our servers weren't working, I didn't have anyone to call. So one piece of advice I would give is, as you're looking at whatever the vendor is that's going to help support your RIA, find ones that are specific to our industry. The other side of that is marketing. A lot of advisors, in my opinion, it's a mistake. They say, well, I don't want to sound like everyone else. I want to go completely out of the market. I'm going to go hire a marketing firm that sells Nike shoes or sells Coca-Cola or whatever it may be. And the problem with that is they don't understand the compliance nuances of our industry. So you get the first run of your website says, we are the greatest wealth manager of all time, or something like that we all know from a compliance perspective, you're not allowed to say. So I think you save yourself a lot of time in finding, whether it's IT or marketing or whatever it may be, but finding service providers that specialize in the wealth management space.
I would add lawyers to that too. I mean, that's
absolutely,
yes. That's from what I see, from securities attorneys to litigation attorneys to employment attorneys. I mean, in fact, starting your own RIA, you probably need all three, unless you can find one that does all three, because each one is different, right? You have individual state law, and if you're across state lines, then you have two state laws to deal with from an employee perspective, and then the securities piece is entirely different as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that one. I've had that I've seen that mistake too, or hopefully I've helped advisors dodge that one. But hey, my buddy's a lawyer. He's really good. I'm going to use him. Well, what does he know about the broker protocol? What does he know about what data you can and can't? Well, he's an employment lawyer. He'll be fine. Or a contract lawyer. He's going to do a really good job negotiating my exit out of here. Well, if he or she doesn't know the nuances, this is not the legal side of this is not something you want to take lightly. So absolutely, you need a lawyer that knows our industry and knows the ins and outs of what data who owns the data and what an advisor can and can't take with them, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen multi-million-dollar lawsuits. I mean, that broker dealers even, who you would think should know this stuff, and they've had to pay multi-million-dollar lawsuits as it relates to data that can be taken and not taken.
Yeah.
So it's, and that's as recently as, I think the most recent was maybe even last year that I saw this ad, so that's an important one. Client privacy, that's the one area that I actually had an attorney that I did a podcast with, and we actually talked about client privacy. That is an area that firms are able to win lawsuits against advisors by violating privacy rules. Yeah. Even if you don't have the non-solicits and that other stuff, it's the privacy stuff that can really come back.
Yeah, the advisors get, as they should, they get very confident saying, my clients love me. They're going to go with me 100%. I am not going to argue with that. But there are some legal landmines you can you can step in on your way out the door, and you don't need to, because you have that great relationship with the client. They're coming. Whether you can get the paperwork to them in 24 hours or in 72 hours, they're going to be coming with you. So there's no reason for you to either naively, or you think you're smarter than the firm you're leaving, and trying to do something just to speed up this process, this transfer of assets, et cetera. There's no reason to cut the corners. Get a good attorney that knows what they're talking about, play by the rules, because you do have that great relationship. You know the clients are coming with you. You don't need to rush this.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, if I could take this a little bit more into the operations, which is, of course, what you do every day. How long does it take for someone to kind of get an RIA established?
So I wrote, one of the articles I wrote at wealthmanagement.com a few years ago was I forget the exact title, but how long does it take to start an RIA? Something like that. And in the
Funny
article,
question.
I said, I don't recommend less than 4 months. And I definitely don't recommend more than 6. A lot of advisors say, well, hey, I'm in no rush. I might as well give myself 2 years and we'll really get this right. And the advice I always give is, the minute you really get going in this process, it gets that much harder every day to go to work and to be under the environment that you're in. You're going to be itching to get the heck out of there. So I try to tell people, you don't want to give yourself a lot more than 6. I wouldn't rush it too much faster than 4. And the two big points there that make it 4 months. One is real estate. Again, I mentioned that's kind of nebulous now, but if you're getting office space, it just seems to be Murphy's Law that every advisor falls in love with completely raw office space that needs to be built from scratch. And those construction delays are going to push your break date further and further out. Ideally, you find an abandoned law office or, whatever, and all you have to do is move an interior wall. Hey, I want the kitchen a little bigger. I want the kitchen a little bit smaller. I want the conference room a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. So you're just moving one interior wall. But for some reason, they always seem to find, it's just cement in there, and they need to put up the walls and build out the individual offices. So you want to start that process as early as you can and get a sense of how long that build out's going to take. And then the other one is just the marketing side. Clearly, from a credibility standpoint, when you call your clients and say, I've just started my own firm, you want to have a working website immediately that they can go to. You won't have a ton of data on there, but at least have your team page and you got a nice logo. Sometimes advisors they can't name the firm. They get into these huge fights. And I say, guys, just pick anything. It doesn't matter. You're going to build the brand after the fact. Apple is a very silly name, in my opinion, of a tech firm, but it's become the greatest brand of all time. It'll become whatever you make of it. But a lot of times they get so, hey, we're going to launch in a month. But do you have a name? And if you don't have a name, you can't get your domain. You can't set up your email addresses. You can't obviously do all the legal filings you need to. So we need a name pretty quickly, guys. And if they get hung up on that, so I say, go find some real estate so that you at least get a sense of how long it'll take for that to be ready for you. And then get the marketing side going early on as well, because if you guys and girls are gonna have a hard time picking a logo or a name, we're gonna need that website ready to go on day one.
Yeah, well, I love that about Apple. I mean, how true is that, right? What kind of a name is that? It's funny, But you said something else that I think is really important for people to understand, right? When you change firms, and you go from employee firm to employee firm, whether it's a wirehouse or regional, or wirehouse to wirehouse, or regional to regional, whatever it is, there's not a lot of decisions that are made, right? It's a lot about moving the business. Then you go from a wirehouse to independent, there's a lot more decisions. There's moving the business, and then there's a lot more of the local. And a lot of independent broker-dealers will help you with some of the business decisions, but not others. So for example, like a lot of independent, they'll have the project management team at an independent BD. You know that. We all know that. And they'll help you with the steps around training and education and the tools that you'll need to move the business. And then they'll even take it a step further around websites and things like that. But they won't go so far as anything local, right? And PFI, and clearly setting up your own independent RIA separate from you or me, right? These are that many more decisions. And I think the challenge that people will have to recognize is it's all of these decisions and who is helping you, right? Every single decision is a new decision. And every time it's a new decision, you're going to have to assume some element of risk or breakage, right? You're just going to make a bad decision when it's a first-time decision. And that's a lot of what you do with, a building out office space, right? Let's talk about, do you need this? This kitchen's too big. The average firm only has this kitchen half the size of this. Why would you need such a big kitchen? So that's a conversation, as an example, that you have with folks, right? As it relates to changing firms, all of that stuff is the work that we do at Bridgemark. But all of it is in the spirit of, we've already done all of this stuff before. And so you get to not have to reinvent the wheel every single time, right? I thought it was just really interesting how I want to highlight what stories you're telling about office space and kitchens and moving walls to actual practice of what advisors having to deal with every single day. Interesting stuff.
Absolutely. And then, I say we're only doing one of these a year. So it's like, well, geez, PFI, what are you doing the rest of the year? I didn't even think of this in 2015, but right now, with so much M&A activity, we're actually working a lot with buyers of either RIAs or onboarding advisors from the wirehouse or IBD channel. We're hired kind of as that implementation team. Because as you mentioned it, from broker dealer to broker dealer, there's a whole staff that's there to help you shepherd your business from one to the other. RIAs many times aren't staffed to have an onboarding team or an integration team. So we've been doing a lot of that, as you can imagine, with all the M&A headlines going on. We've been doing a lot of that these days.
Absolutely. It's actually one of the questions that we tend to ask when we're looking at firms is, what is the onboarding experience? Who is the team? What's the experience of the team? How many deals do you do? All of that
Exactly.
stuff, because this is where we see firms overselling and over promising and under delivering. And sometimes people don't know what questions to ask. That's the work that we tend to try to flesh out in the evaluations that we're doing.
Yeah.
It really is one of those things that there's so many, it's easy to make promises. It's to be able to follow through with those promises, which becomes really challenging, I think.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, when we talk about technology, just kind of pivoting again, just these are other really important topics to financial advisors, to RIAs. You help with some of these decisions. When you think about technology, how do you think about technology, right? Between portfolio reporting and billing softwares and CRM softwares, what do you think about that stuff, and what kind of questions do you get from advisors?
So another article we wrote, you need to choose your ideal client before you choose your tech stack. Something along those lines was the title of it. I get the call all the time. Advisors say, look, I don't have a lot of time. I'll buy whatever system you tell me to. Just what's the best reporting provider? Just give me the answer, PFI. I just need the answer. And then I'm going to hang up and I'm going to go buy it. And they think I'm just trying to weasel my way into this long, complicated consulting engagement. But there's great things about Adipar. There's great things about Orion. There's great things about Tamarack. There's fantastic things about Black Diamond. But it depends on who's your ideal client and what services are you providing. We already talked about, are you more focused on financial planning? Or are you more focused on investment management? So again, I know this sounds like consultant speak, but we don't have a platform. There is no PFI tech stack that we just, rinse and repeat. One custodian may be fantastic for one advisor, and a different custodian might be the right fit for a different advisor. So, and again, our industry is growing so rapidly. They all are fantastic at what they do. And they'll admit we're great for advisors that, if you're mostly in SMAs, we're the reporting provider for you. If you're mostly in alternative investments, we're the reporting provider for you. They all have their kind of specialties and things. So we always kind of work through and figure out who that ideal client is, what service offering is the RIA going to be providing, and then we build the stack around that. But just to run through high level, I always start with the custodian, because that's where all the data is going to reside, and then it'll feed into the performance reporting tool. So I usually do, let's figure out your custodian first, performance reporting second, then you think about your CRM. And again, there's a million ways an advisor could use a CRM. Am I just using it as a place to dump some notes after a call? Or am I really going to run my back office through my CRM? Am I going to be assigning tasks? And are we going to be running workflows, et cetera? So that all depends on which CRM we choose. Beyond CRM, if they're running models in-house, they will need a rebalancing tool. If they're mostly using SMAs, they won't need a rebalancing tool. Everybody's kind of sold on, yes, you have to have a trading tool. And it's not necessarily the case depending on what your investment vehicles look like. Then clearly we've been talking about how important financial planning is. So we'll have to look at, eMoney, Money Guide Pro, whatever it may be. And then the last piece in my mind kind of that RIA tech stack is just research. What are you relying on to help you make your investment recommendations? You're leaving Morgan Stanley with this entire research department, or Merrill Lynch or Ameriprise, whatever, LPL, whatever it may be. So what tools are we using for our investment research?
You said something earlier on, which I'm going to come back to, which was each firm is good in its own way, and they're all a little different.
Yep.
And that's true with the custodians. That's true among broker dealers. I mean, at Bridgemark, we literally have 130 agreements with different firms. And people always ask me, how do you have that many? How do you organize it? Well, we organize it into 9 different silos or 9 different categories. And each silo is different, clearly. And then from there, it's really about working with advisors and understanding what advisors' motivations are to try to narrow down and refine the list into a workable handful. But what's super interesting about what you just said about the technology is exact same thing about the broker dealers. Last year alone at Bridgemark, and that would be 2021, we helped advisors join 30 uniquely different firms. So it's just a scattering of different solutions in the marketplace that we're working through with advisors. The point of all that, coming back to the technology, is it's about what's important to the individual, right? So the interviewing and the consulting, as you say, consultant speak, technically it is consultant speak. You and I guess speak the same language, obviously, right? But it's the real work that has to happen is to get to the right solution. I get asked the same question all the time: who's the best broker dealer?
Yep.
And well, what is that based on? Is it based on the biggest? Is it based on the best? Who's recruiting the most? Is it based on the best transition money? Or is it based on the things that are important to you that are really important? So it's really that approach to knowledge of the business and knowledge of the challenges that they're going to face, right? That's where I see what you're doing at PFI is so beneficial, which is why I wanted to do this podcast with you, is because you've got such a different perspective with the teams that you're talking to and the experience that you have, that I thought our listeners would really gain knowledge from that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, you and I both, the value is you're not going to show them 130 options, but you have knowledge of 130 different ones. And then once you've done this interview and kind of figured out what's important to them, then you can show them 3 maybe of that 130 and help them. And that's what the true value is. They don't have to go have 130 conversations.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yep.
Exactly right. Yeah. Hey, Matt, I really appreciate your time here on this podcast. This has been really beneficial. I really appreciate you joining me here, and you and I will continue to work together on new things in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
My pleasure.